Last week we talked about, who did we talk about? Anybody remember? Zacchaeus. Yeah. So we had, as I like to refer to it, lessons from a little man last week. And this week we're going to have a lesson from the man in the shadows. We're going to talk about Nicodemus tonight and his interaction with Jesus. There's quite a few things I think that we can learn out of his encounters. So tonight, let's start off in John chapter 3. And I'm going to read maybe the first 9, 10 verses. That'll get us the first encounter with Nicodemus. Starting in verse 1, there was a man of the Pharisees named Nicodemus, a ruler of the Jews. This man came to Jesus by night and said to him, Rabbi, we know that you are a teacher come from God, for no one can do these signs you do unless God is with him. Jesus answered and said to him, Most assuredly, I say to you, unless one is born again, he cannot see the kingdom of God. Nicodemus said to him, How can a man be born when he is old? Can he enter a second time into his mother's womb and be born? Jesus answered, Most assuredly I say to you, unless one is born of water and spirit, he cannot enter the kingdom of God. That which is born of flesh is flesh, and that which is born of spirit is spirit. Do not marvel that I say to you, you must be born again. The wind blows where it wishes, and you hear the sound of it, but cannot tell where it comes from and where it goes. So is everyone who is born of the Spirit. Let's just stop right there for a minute. So let's just start with some background on Nicodemus, who he was. It tells us right here, he's a ruler of the Jews. So what do we know from that? Can you pull anything out of that? What's his history? Where's he going to be from? Where's he going to be coming from?
Jewish council.
He's a member of the Jewish council. He's a Pharisee. So he, being a ruler of the Jews, he would have been kind of prominent in society. He would have been, at least among probably himself and the group around him, considered religious elites. Okay? He comes to Jesus acknowledging him as a teacher that's come from God. Now, there's when he comes to Jesus at night, there's a lot of speculation as to why. We don't know, we're not really told. What's some speculation? What do you think he comes to Jesus at night for? What would you think?
He's afraid of what people might think.
Could be.
Timid faith.
You got a guy that is he is on the Sanhedrin Council. Jesus has made quite a few waves, in the area. So he's causing quite a stir. So Nicodemus may be coming to him at night to avoid being seen by some of his peers. He could be trying to avoid some trouble for himself. But he also could be coming to him at night because he is on the council and there's a lot of things going on, and he's a busy guy. And where's Jesus at? What's he got going on through the day in society? What's going on in his life?
Crowds of people.
Crowds of who said that? Yeah, crowds of people. Yeah. So there's, it's a possibility. We're not told, it's all just speculation, but it may not necessarily be a negative thing from Nicodemus' standpoint. It could be that that's the best time to get one-on-one with Jesus. Very well could be. We don't know. But it does say a lot about Nicodemus that he, at least being who he is, has come to seek Jesus out and talk to him and acknowledge him. He thinks he is giving him a great compliment by being a teacher come from God. But what John, in his whole gospel, what he's setting out to prove for the most part is that Jesus is not a teacher come from God, but Jesus is God with us on this earth. And so the encounter where Nicodemus is saying, we know that you're a teacher from God, Jesus, he sets about to try and clear some things up for him. So, you know, Nicodemus also, being where he come from and his background, he would probably consider himself, well, I've already said it, religious, the elite religiously. So he's probably a guy who is used to people talking to him and asking him questions, and he's got the answers. But when he comes to Jesus, does anybody find it odd, Jesus' first response to him? Think about what he says. Verse 2. This man came to Jesus by night, and he said to him, Rabbi, we know that you are a teacher come from God, for no one can do these signs you do unless God is with him. And Jesus answered and said to him, Most assuredly, I say to you, unless one is born again, he cannot see the kingdom of God. Now that's always struck me as a really odd reply to what Nicodemus has said. Anybody else, or is it just me? Doesn't seem to fit. Y'all out there? I got anything?
I agree with you.
So, you know, the studying for this it's really helped me a lot. Try to understand what's going on here. So, like I said, Nicodemus, he is a ruler of the Jews. He's got authority. He's got power. And when he compliments Jesus' response to him tells him, and it tells me, and it tells you, that no matter where we come from, what our background is or what our history is, we're not automatically in anything. See, Nicodemus was a part of the chosen people. He was an Israelite. He was a Jew. He was a Jew. And he was considered in God's people. So Jesus is telling him that just because you were born here doesn't put you in God's family. And I think that is a lesson for us today. You know, no matter where we're born into or what we come into, we're not automatically in God's family. We have to be added to God's family. And this is when that started. You know, I've heard people say, and I know you all have too, well, you know, my grandparents went to church here, I was raised in the church, and all those kind of statements are great, and that's good for history and background and all that, but it doesn't make us anything if we don't ourselves put Jesus on. And I think that is why, I don't know, we're not told, but it seems like a reasonable explanation because that's why Jesus told Nicodemus, unless one is born of water and the Spirit, born again, you're not going to see God. Just because you are here doesn't automatically put you here. Anybody got any comments or rebuttal? Now, Neil's not here, so we can't take a lot of questions tonight, but we'll do the best we can. Nothing? Rain got y'all down?
Hey, Ted.
Oh.
So, I think Jesus obviously knows Nicodemus' heart. And he just cuts right to the chase. He goes straight to the core, you know, because I'm sure Nicodemus has a million questions or whatever. And Jesus just holds no punches and just goes straight to Nicodemus' heart, so to speak.
Well, you know, there's no doubt that he knows. If you back up to the end of chapter 2, I think let's see, let's just read 23, 24, and 25. Now, when he was in Jerusalem, that's Jesus, at the Passover during the feast, many believed in his name when they saw the signs which he did. But Jesus did not commit himself to them because he knew all men and had no need that anyone should testify of man, for he knew what was in man. So you're exactly right. He knew exactly what was in Nicodemus' heart, and he didn't need to get a bunch of questions by him. And so I think he cut right to the chase. Took me a long time to kind of understand. I just have always thought that's just really an odd response to a compliment, one would think. Gary, you had your hand up.
That was the same thing. He just cuts right to the chase. You know, I'm not concerned that you're going to call me rabbi and all that. Here's what you need to do.
Right.
It's also showing a confession. So if you do confess me as coming from God or being God, then here's what has to be done.
Yeah.
The next step.
Right.
Instead of dwelling on the fact that he is God, Nicodemus has already confessed it.
That's right. Being born again, what does that mean for us? What's that mean to us?
The old man's dead, we put on a new man, spiritual man. I think Christ went straight from physical to spiritual. And the Pharisees were more about power, physical power, not dealing with the heart. God is dealing with the heart of man. I think Nicodemus was changing. I think he was curious, and was wanting to know more about Christ. And I think that's part of the spiritual. One of the first things you do is confess that Christ is the Son of God. And I don't know, I think God is going from laws to man's heart with Jesus. And I think it's hard for the Jewish people to understand that, especially the Jewish leaders. They're fixing to be pushed aside.
Right. We're never told. There's 3 times that Nicodemus is mentioned. All 3 of them are in John's Gospel. But we're never told if he ever commits or not. I think there is some maybe not some conclusions to draw, but I think there's some strong evidence that he very well might have, but we're not told explicitly. But we'll get to some of that a little bit later, I hope. But Nicodemus he's an educated man, a ruler of the Jews on the Sanhedrin Council, probably come from a powerful family. But Jesus, in his response to Nicodemus, and then Nicodemus's response to him, how can one be born again? Can he enter the womb the second time? It shows that Nicodemus, he was not unfamiliar with the old law. He was not unfamiliar with prophecies concerning Jesus, but he missed them all. They all missed them all. These were intelligent religious leaders of the day, and they missed things. They didn't see them. They didn't catch them. And I think a lesson that we can draw out of that is, there's a lot of we all encounter, highly educated people, very smart people who aren't able to grasp the teachings of Jesus. Yeah.
I think it could be a testament to Nicodemus's faith when he says, "Can you go back into the mother's womb?" Because he knew that the things that he did were from God. And so I think maybe he really thought that somehow he could go back, from God. There was a way, a sign or a miracle where God could maybe put him back in the womb. I don't know. I don't think I mean, it was a misunderstanding, but part of me thinks that it could be part of his faith too.
Well, I think it was a question to, or not a question, but a statement to stop Nicodemus right in his tracks and tell him, you come from here, but you've got to get here. And that is, I think that fits everybody in this room and everybody in this world. We've come from here, but we've got to get here. And we've got to be willing to do some of the things that Nicodemus done. You know, the first thing that jumps out to me about Nicodemus is he went to Jesus. He sought him out. We have got to be willing to seek Jesus out. And if we're not, then we'll never have an opportunity to spend eternity with him. If we don't seek him out, we've got to be looking. We who have found Jesus also have to be in the business of helping people find him.
Absolutely. Amen.
I think, you know, there's a lot of lessons to come out of here. And that right there, to me, is the first and the strongest one, is that Nicodemus was looking. He did not, you can't say he didn't care, because we don't know. But he at least didn't let his influence around him, who were his peers on the Sanhedrin, the other Jews that were not happy with what Jesus was doing in their country, he didn't let that stop him from going. Whether he went at night because he didn't want to be seen or not, he still didn't let it stop him from going. And we can't let people around us influence what we're going to be doing as well. We have to be seeking Jesus out no matter what people are going to think of us. Anything else?
Kevin, if you go to John chapter 7,
You know it's what I'm doing. Go ahead.
Nicodemus, in John chapter 7, verse 50, Nicodemus, he who came to Jesus by night, being one of them, said to them, does our law judge a man without hearing him and knowing what he is doing? Nicodemus went to him to figure out who he was and if he was the real deal, I think. He had already heard about it. The Sanhedrin had heard about it. They were all confused about what Jesus was here to do. But Nicodemus had the wherewithal to go to him and seek him out and find out what Jesus was all about.
Yep.
They answered in verse 52. They answered and said to him, are you also from Galilee? Which nothing had ever came from Galilee. Search and look for no prophet has arisen out of Galilee. Nothing had ever came out of Galilee, no prophets.
But that's not right. They said that, but it's not right.
Not until now.
No, that's not even right. Jonah come up out of Galilee.
Correct.
So, you know, they said it, but it wasn't right. Yeah.
So I think he had a purpose. It was to answer questions for himself.
Yeah.
And sometimes we don't even do that.
No.
We assume.
No, I think, like I said, I think the first and greatest lesson out of this is we need to seek Jesus out. We need to be looking for the answers to the questions that we have. Some of the points, we need to be humble enough to come to Jesus with our questions. We need to see Jesus as more than just a teacher or a rabbi. That's how Nicodemus told him he viewed him. Jeremy?
I think it's interesting there in verse 3, if you compare it to verse 5. He could have just started with verse 5 and answered his question, gave you more detail, but you ask the simpler answer, the simple way first, just to see how interested are you in the answer.
Yeah.
How much do you want to dig for? Then when he came back, he gave him a little more detail. And I think with us, sometimes Jesus wants us to work for him. God wants us to dig a little deeper and learn for ourselves and ask questions, try to figure things out, and understand things better.
Yeah.
I think that's why he just rephrased it a little bit, added a little more to it, verse 5 through verse 8 there. I think sometimes you'll test us, we got questions, but how much do we want to work to answer?
Right.
Understand ourselves better.
You said something a minute ago that's interesting. It was that we all have to seek Jesus out. It doesn't matter who we are. And you mentioned family. I read an article talking about family in the church, what the church today is facing. It doesn't matter what your great-great-grandfather, if he was a Bible scholar or he went to church every Sunday, it might have an effect on your life, but it does not impact your salvation other than it's part of your heritage. And then his father, it may impact how he went to church, but each one of us can't rely on our mom and dad and our grandparents getting us to heaven. We have to, each one of us, own our own faith, because when we get to the judgment, it's not going to be Dixon Simpson standing there with me holding my hand, and Dana's not going to be holding my hand. It's going to be Russell.
Yep.
And same thing for Shannon and Kaya, and each one of us has to seek Jesus out and answer the questions and buy our own faith or have our own faith.
We have to own it.
If we don't, then
I asked the high school class, I taught, I don't know, it's been a couple years ago now, and I don't remember who all was in there, but I asked them, I said, why are y'all here? And one of them, he was being cute. He said, my mama brought me. Okay, that's a fair answer. But my point was to them is, you have to be here because you want to be here. Your mama's faith, your daddy's faith, you just coming to church doesn't make you a disciple of Christ. It has to be yours, you have to own it. At what point that becomes true for all of us, it varies. For some, it's a lot earlier than others. But we all have to own it. And Nicodemus separated himself from his peers, and he didn't let what they thought or what they would think influence him seeking Jesus out. And I think that's a great lesson for us today.
Kevin, one thing, what you just said, if you look at verse 2, when he said, Rabbi, he said, we know that you have come from God as a teacher. So they had been discussing amongst themselves. So did the whole Sanhedrin know that he was coming? Was he the spokesman coming to find out and ask these questions? Because it specifically says, we know that you have come from God.
Yeah, and we don't know who the we is. You got to think that it wasn't the whole Sanhedrin council, because they were the ones who turned him over. So maybe it was him and his family. I don't know. But it is interesting that it was just more than him, and he came to find out.
Hey, Kevin.
Yeah.
I also see that we're surrounded by Nicodemus today.
Sure.
Everywhere we go, because there's people that believe. There were a lot of the Sanhedrin that believed, I think.
Yeah.
But they weren't willing to act on it.
Right.
And the actions that they were willing to do were to save themselves the status instead of saving their souls. I believe you can take this as a model for what can we do for those people. How can we teach these people that say they believe that Jesus Christ is the Son of God, but then they don't believe enough to act on it?
Right.
To me, that's the reason Jesus points out the next step. Like, okay, so you say I'm from God, and you say it's because of all these signs and wonders that you've been seeing, but would you be willing to act on that? Would you be willing to do something off the wall, like be born again, that's where a lot of people are right now, I think, that are lost. I mean, how many times in the New Testament, it's numerous examples of when it says demons believe, they fear and tremble.
Yeah.
That didn't save them.
Yeah, believing doesn't do anything. It takes action along with it. That's very good. For some reason, everything that pretty much all the tools that I've used to kind of get ready for this lesson breaks the interaction with Nicodemus down from like chapter 3 verses 1 through 7, and then moves over to chapter 7, and then moves over to the last interaction, which is chapter 19. But this whole chapter 3, this is all, as far as I can tell, Nicodemus is still standing there when Jesus is talking. So I want to go ahead and just read all the way through this, because this is Jesus talking to Nicodemus. Verse 9, Nicodemus answered and said to him, "How can these things be?" Talking about born of the Spirit. Jesus answered and said to him, "Are you a teacher of Israel and do not know these things? Most assuredly I say to you, we speak what we know and we testify what we have seen, and you do not receive our witness. If I told you earthly things and you do not believe, how will you believe if I tell you heavenly things? No one has ascended to heaven but he who came down from heaven, that is, the Son of Man who is in heaven. And as Moses lifted up the serpent in the wilderness, even so the Son of Man be lifted up, that whoever believes in him should not perish but have eternal life. For God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten Son, that whoever believes in him should not perish but have everlasting life. For God did not send his Son into the world to condemn the world, but that the world through him might be saved." Verse 18. "And he who believes in him is not condemned, but he who does not believe is condemned already, because he has not believed in the name of the Son of the only begotten Son. And this is the condemnation, that the light has come into the world, and that men love darkness rather than light, because their deeds were evil. For everyone practicing evil hates the light and does not come to the light, lest his deeds should be exposed. But he who does the truth comes to the light, that his deeds may be clearly seen, they have been done in God." Now, I don't know. As I was studying for that, I thought that last part there is pretty interesting, because what time is this? I don't know, it's dark. And Jesus is telling Nicodemus that those who, everyone practicing evil hates the light, does not come to the light, lest his deeds should be exposed. Nicodemus has come to him at night. I've just found it very interesting that Jesus talks about people not, evil and darkness and light and goodness. I don't know. There's a little bit more, I think, to this as we go on into Nicodemus's encounters with Jesus. And we're going to talk about that. Hopefully, I can get that to the end. The next time that we meet Nicodemus is over in chapter 7, and verses 45 through 52. Somebody have their hand up. Then the officers came to the chief priests and the Pharisees, who said to them, "Why have you not brought him?" They sent him out to seize Jesus. And the officers answered, "No man ever spoke like this man." Then the Pharisees answered, "Are you also deceived? Have any of the rulers of the Pharisees believed in him? But this crowd that does not know the law is accursed." Nicodemus, that's he who come to Jesus by night, being one of them, said to them, "Does our law judge a man before it hears him and knows what he is doing?" They answered and said to him, "Are you also from Galilee? Search and look, for no prophet has arisen out of Galilee." So it would seem, at this point still, they don't know that Nicodemus has went and talked to Jesus. Because in verse 48, they say, "Have any of the rulers or the Pharisees believed in him?"
But it also indicates they know about it.
They know about it for
And
sure.
they're talking about it.
For sure. But Nicodemus stands up and he tries to uphold Jesus to them by telling them, let's at least hear what he's got to say. Now, is he trying to protect himself and his position and where he's at in life?
He's doing something, because he could have just said, well, hey, I talked to him and I know this. He doesn't admit that he talked to him.
Doesn't say it.
Can we all just talk?
Well, he's making a plea for justice.
Yeah.
For them to adhere to their law.
Can you be a secret disciple of Jesus?
Yes, you could, but you wouldn't be an effective disciple.
Wouldn't think so, would you? It seems like he may be trying to defend him kind of a little bit secretly, you know?
It seems to me he lacks boldness, like through and through, because we're called to, be bold in our faith, and he's almost halfway defending it, like just, instead of raising his hand the full way, he's just doing the, halfway kind of thing.
We have got to be willing to stand up in front of people, not to teach class, but we have to be willing to let our faith put us out in front of people. I think Nicodemus, he may be slowly moving this way from his first interaction with Jesus. The first time that he talked to Jesus, it was at night. Now he's trying to get people to give him a chance in the daylight. I keep going back to, I always tell everybody, Christianity, it's a growing process for, I think, everybody. I don't think anybody, I might be wrong, but I don't think anybody has arrived until you've arrived at the end. We're all growing, I think, while we're here on this earth, and we all have opportunities that are before us. I think we need to look for our opportunities. I think we need to have our eyes open wherever we're going and look for opportunities that are around us. I know they present themselves in different ways at different times and in different places. And Nicodemus, he had the ability to maybe not to change a lot of people's minds, but he did have the ability to reach a lot of influential and important people about who Jesus was. He may or may not have done the best job that he could have done in that situation. I would like to say that I have took full advantage of every opportunity that's ever been presented to me to share the gospel. But I would stand before you being a liar, because I haven't. And I don't, that's really no different than what Nicodemus was here in this situation. He probably didn't use his position to the best of his ability. But I do think that we're tasked to try and do that every day, everywhere. Comments, questions? Nothing? Nothing?
In those days, there was a fear. Christians were persecuted. Peter denied him. And Herod kind of washed it. He didn't want to crucify him, but he kind of washed his hands and let the people have their way. They didn't stand up and if you don't, you're not worthy of them.
But we don't face that kind of persecution like they possibly did back then. What keeps us from potentially sharing our faith as much as we should?
Using an earthly status.
I didn't, somebody said something, but I didn't hear.
Losing an earthly status.
Losing earthly status, okay. That's fair. Anything else?
Fear of being judged by others.
Okay. Fear of being judged by others. Maybe the fear of losing a friend.
Fear of being seen as judgy by others.
Huh?
Fear of being seen as judgy by others.
Okay. All right. Well, that's a fair and valid point, and it also can lead us to the place of where, when we are in some type of discussion about religious matters, we need to be very careful to make sure that we're not trying to be right. We're trying to be what the Bible says. It's not about us being right. It's not about them being right. We have to be able to be willing to follow the Word. And if we can ever get to where everybody is in agreement that this right here is that's the standard, and that's what we're using, then that'll make us maybe a little bit more effective at trying to save souls, because it's not who's right, it's what's right, and the Bible is right. So we just have to be able to not try to get into some type of he's right, she's right, argumentative type of situation. Just this is what we're using because this is the standard. Anything else? All right. The very last time that anything is said about Nicodemus is in John chapter 19, verses 38 to 42. And I'm a little hesitant to read verse 38 because Joseph of Arimathea is one of my guys too, and he ain't talked about a whole lot either, except for right here. So, but verse 38, and after this, Joseph of Arimathea, being a disciple of Jesus, but secretly for fear of Jews, asked Pilate that he might take away the body of Jesus. Pilate gave him permission, so he came and took the body of Jesus. Verse 39. And Nicodemus, who first came to Jesus by night, also came, bringing a mixture of myrrh, aloes, about 100 pounds. They took the body of Jesus, bound it in strips of linen, with the spices, as was the custom of the Jews, to bury it. So the last time that we see Nicodemus, he is helping to prepare Jesus' body for burial. I think if you go all the way back to John chapter 3, in the last two verses of John chapter 3, we kind of talked about them a little bit. The last three verses, 19, 20, and 21. Jesus said to him, and this is the condemnation, that the light has come into the world, and men love darkness rather than light, because their deeds were evil. For everyone practicing evil hates the light, lest his deeds should be exposed. But he who does the truth comes to the light, that his deeds may be clearly seen. I think it's very interesting that the first time that we're introduced to Nicodemus, he comes to him at night, hidden away from everybody. But his encounters and his interaction with Jesus, by the last time that we see him, he's clearly in the day. He's clearly helping with Jesus. Now it is at his death, but I think that is a powerful point, that if we will seek Jesus out, we will find him in the day. And I think that's where we need to be looking. That may not be anything. It just struck me as I was preparing for this lesson that how he come to him at night, but then he was with him in the day.
But do you think that it was still in secret though? Because Joseph of Arimathea went secretly.
No, it says he was a disciple secretly. He went to Pilate.
Yeah.
but he was secretly a disciple. Anything? You know,
I just think there's gotta be some major significance behind the Jesus by night, because he's like referred to every time.
Every time.
As, hey, this is the guy that came to Jesus by night.
Mhm.
So why would that be repeated?
why is it important and why is it said every time he's mentioned? Yeah, I don't know. But I do know when they buried him, it was in the daylight, or when they prepared his body. And he was seen, and he was a member of the Sanhedrin Council. So, I mean, I don't know, you know, how it happened, but he wasn't trying to be hidden when he was preparing Jesus' body. So he was not ashamed to be seen with him at that point. And I think that's what people who truly seek Jesus out, I think that's where we wind up at. Not being scared to be seen with Jesus or be aligned with Jesus. And I think, even though it doesn't explicitly say, it seems like that's where Nicodemus found himself at towards the end. I don't know.
And a lot of people like that, you know, that you watch him kind of struggle through that relationship. Like, he was interested, he believed part of it, but it's a struggle going against everything he's ever thought and believed, and all his people and all his peers. But, you know, he persisted through that struggle and obviously got to a better place, because I don't think you're going to prepare a body for burial if you don't care anything about it. And who knows even where he was in his walk at that point. But obviously moving forward, and I mean, that's just what we all do.
That's what we do. Anybody?
Kevin?
Yeah.
But this may shed a little light, I don't know, but it's gonna steal a little maybe thunder for the next one.
I may have to change my line on that.
After this, Joseph of Arimathea, being a disciple of Christ, but secretly, why? For fear of the Jews.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe that was the reason for both of those. They were, you know, in the Jewish council, the Sanhedrin, and you know, they were going to be outcast,
Sure.
ostracized, because back in chapter 7, it talks about being deceived. Are you deceived too? So, you know, it's pride and it's that thing of status, and they were making a big commitment. And I think at this point, they had made their bed, they was going to lie, and they were going to be saved.
They made their decision. Thank you, guys.